My son, Caspian, had taken his father's final legacy, the car he poured 20 years into, and sold it for pocket change. Also, his new wife, Sylvia, could have a 2-week fantasy trip. That betrayal was a deep, silent ache, but the real cold fear didn't hit until the phone rang the next morning. It was a man I'd never met, a dealership owner, telling me he had the car, and that Alistair had foreseen this. He said my late husband had made him swear to call me if the car ever left my house, because there was a secret hidden inside, a final, crucial message that exposed who Sylvia really was. My heart was pounding. Was my dead husband reaching out to save me? Before we go any further, I need to know. If your child betrayed your trust like this, would you fight for justice or try to find a way to forgive? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. We're building a community here of fighters who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. Caspian, my son, had done this. He'd taken the car, the burgundy 1967 Shelby GT500, the machine that was more than just metal and chrome, but the very last tangible piece of my late husband Alistair, and sold it, just like that. The betrayal felt like a sudden, brutal eviction from the sanctuary of my grief. This wasn't just a car. It was Alistair's 20-year love affair, the promise of our retirement road trip, the history of our family polished into every inch of its restored body. 8 months I'd spent navigating the silence of widowhood, but this new silence, the absence of his masterpiece, was a whole new kind of heartbreak. I felt my 70 years in the sudden tremor of my hands. I'd been a nurse in the ICU for 40 years. I knew how to stay steady in a crisis. But this wasn't a crisis of the body. It was a wound to the soul. I didn't want to think, to breathe, or to act. I only wanted to rewind the clock to the moment before I saw the garage door rolled up, revealing the theft of my peace. I walked toward Alistair's old workbench, my movements slow and heavy. The air still held the ghost of his scent. Motor oil, old leather, and his preferred citrus hand soap. The tools hung precisely on the pegboard, their shapes traced in black marker. His closed red toolbox sat ready. I picked up his work journal, the worn leather cool against my palm. The last entry, dated 3 weeks before his sudden heart attack, detailed the carburetor replacement. Almost done. 20 years on this beauty. Can't wait to teach Raquel to drive her properly. Our retirement road trip starts next summer. My name, Raquel, written in his steady, loving script, was a fresh, hot blade in my chest. He had wanted this for us. He had planned to sit beside me as I gripped the worn, beautiful wheel. I replaced the journal, closing my eyes against the sudden, overwhelming wave of loss. I could almost hear the classic rock spilling from the old radio, Alistair humming off key, lost in his work. He was still here, in the smells and the silence, but the heart of the space, the wildfire, was gone, taken by the one person he believed would honor its legacy. That was the deepest cut. Not the loss of the car, but the loss of Caspian's integrity. A car engine broke the quiet morning, a sleek, aggressive rumble that cut through the Oakwood Drive air. I turned as Caspian's leased black BMW, a symbol of a life he couldn't actually afford, pulled into the driveway. He got out, 38 years old, and a decade of my careful nurturing seemed to have vanished from his frame. The immediate slump of his shoulders, the way his hands plunged into his pockets. It was the posture of a guilty child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, only the cookie jar held 2 decades of someone's soul. Then the passenger door opened. Sylvia emerged, looking effortlessly perfect, an expensive, dark-haired silhouette in designer sunglasses and clothes that screamed disposable income. She stood by the car, and even through the dark lenses I felt her gaze, cold and assessing, fixed on me in the doorway of the empty garage. Her presence solidified the truth. This wasn't a mistake born of panic. This was a calculated move, executed by 2 people who saw a piece of family history as nothing more than a transactional asset to fuel their manufactured aspiration. Caspian walked towards me, stopping a respectful but telling distance away at the edge of the driveway, where the concrete met the grass. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he began, his voice flat, devoid of real emotion. I simply waited, crossing my arms over my chest, shielding myself from the inevitable words. My voice, when I finally spoke, was low, steady, and utterly without heat, the tone I used in the ICU when delivering difficult news. "Where's the car, Caspian?" His jaw tightened. The air between us became thick with unsaid guilt and impending confrontation. "That's what I need to talk to you about," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the dirty toe of his expensive shoe. I took a deliberate, painful step into the empty garage, gesturing to the oil stain. "It was here yesterday. Where is it now?" The words finally came, hurried and small, a childish confession that tried to masquerade as adult reasoning. I sold it. The statement hung there, an absurdity my brain refused to process. "You what?" I didn't shout the question. I merely mouthed it, feeling the tightness in my chest constrict into a suffocating band. "I sold it yesterday afternoon, Mom." He finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot, tired, and full of the self-pity that always followed his poor decisions. He rushed the explanation, as if speed could mitigate the damage. "I needed the money. Sylvia has been planning this Paris trip for months. It's important for her business connections. I couldn't let her down." His need to impress her, his desperate, shallow ambition, had cost him his father's trust and his last connection to him. My calm finally fractured. "That was your father's car. It was going to stay in the family," he snapped back, instantly defensive, the guilty child turning into a resentful man. "Dad's gone, Mom. It was just sitting there. You don't even drive it." The finality in his voice was past tense, was brutal. He was justifying an act of desecration. He even offered a price, hoping the small number would somehow make it better. I got a good price for it, too, $15,000. That's fair for a car that old. $15,000 for the wildfire. A car Alistair had spent 20 years lovingly, meticulously restoring. The fury I felt was cold and clinical. I wanted to scream, but the ICU training took over. Breathe, think, act. "When did you take it?" He had used his old key, the one I'd never asked for back, knowing Alistair always left the garage unlocked. "You should have asked me," I whispered, the words heavy with disappointment. "Would you have said yes?" he challenged, throwing the responsibility back at me. "No, Caspian," I said clearly. "I wouldn't have." And that's when Sylvia walked up, inserting herself into the conversation with the slick confidence of a seasoned predator. She looped her perfectly manicured hand through Caspian's arm, her red nails flashing like a warning sign. "Rachel, we are not discussing this. It's done. The car is sold. We leave for Paris tomorrow." The finality, the sheer, unapologetic coldness of her delivery felt like the ultimate humiliation, a victory dance over my loss. I looked at my son, then at her, and the anger was suddenly replaced by a terrifying clarity. They were not just stealing a car, they were stealing a future, and I was going to have to fight for it. I stood my ground, refusing to be dismissed by my son's new wife. My voice remained steady, the years of managing emotional trauma in the ICU serving me well. "This is between me and my son." Sylvia's pleasant smile didn't move an inch, but her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes behind the designer lenses, narrowed just slightly. "I'm his wife, Rachel," she cooed, her tone reasonable, patronizing. "What's between you and him is between all of us. Caspian needed that money." The car was sitting unused. It made sense to sell it. The audacity of her logic, the way she could package greed as sound business sense, was chilling. "It was his father's," I repeated, not as a statement of fact, but as a final attempt to appeal to any shred of decency in my son. Her response was flat, emotionless, a surgeon's incision on a dead body. His father is dead, and Caspian is trying to build a life. We both are. Surely you understand that. The casual cruelty of her words, the absolute dismissal of Alistair's memory, finally broke the dam of my composure. I couldn't speak. didn't trust the shaking rage that threatened to overtake me. I simply stared at Caspian, but he still wouldn't meet my gaze, cowed by his perfect, terrifying wife, whose hand remained glued to his arm, a leash disguised as affection. "We'll send you photos from Paris, Rachel," Sylvia offered, her smile widening, a gesture that was more of a taunt than a kindness. "You'd love it there. The architecture, the museums. Very romantic." The casual insertion of romantic was the final barb, a reminder that they were off to build their future on the scorched earth of my past. Caspian, finally stirred by what little conscience he had left, shifted uncomfortably. "We should go, Mom. Still need to pack." Sylvia gave his arm a gentle proprietary tug, moving him toward the BMW. "Yes, we have an early flight." As they walked away, Caspian glanced back, just a flicker of his old self, a quick, guilt-ridden look at me standing in the empty garage, a ghost in my own home, dressed in slippers and betrayal. Then he got in the car. Sylvia's window rolled down, her voice coming out crisp and insincere. "Take care of yourself, Rachel. We'll see you when we get back." The BMW backed out, tires crunching on the gravel, and then it was gone, swallowed by the turn at the end of Oakwood Drive. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy and profound. I was utterly alone, a widow twice over, first by death, now by my own son. I walked back into the silent garage, stood in the center, and gazed down at the oil stain. The morning sun, now higher, streamed through the open door, illuminating swirling motes of dust dancing in the air, the dust that would have been settled on the wildfire's immaculate paint. I picked up Alistair's journal again, opening it to that final entry. His words about our road trip, about the finished 20 years of work, mocked the gaping reality. Everything was there, his tools, his radio, the motor oil smell of him, except the masterpiece. The empty space felt like an open wound, and for the first time in months, the tears came. Not the quiet, manageable grief of a widow, but deep, racking sobs that shook me from head to toe. This was not grief. This was pain, raw and searing, caused by the one person I had trusted to protect Alistair's memory. I locked the garage door, walked back to the house, and carried the journal with me, a shield against the utter desolation I felt. The world was moving on. A dog barked, a lawnmower started, but my world had stopped, paralyzed by my son's act of greed. The phone rang at 7 the next morning. It was an hour before I usually woke up, but I'd been sitting at the kitchen table since 4, staring at the same page in Alistair's journal, the one detailing the precise measurements for a carburetor replacement. The phone's insistent alien sound shattered the quiet focus of my morning. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some flicker of my ICU training, that instinct to respond to the urgent and the unexpected, made me answer. "Hello?" A man's voice, rough, a little gravelly, like he'd been crying, came through the line. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Theo Vance from Vance Classic Autos. I have your husband's car." I sat bolt upright, the old nurse's adrenaline kicking in. "What? The Shelby? My son sold it." I felt foolish and exposed, admitting the humiliation to a stranger. "Your son Caspian brought it in Wednesday. I need you to come to the dealership, please, right now if you can. There's something Alistair wanted you to know." My mind scrambled, trying to process the impossible. Alistair's car, a secret message? "I don't understand," I managed, my voice a tight thread. The man's voice cracked with unexpected emotion. "Alistair was my friend, a good friend. I was at his funeral. I should have spoken to you then, but I couldn't. I'm sorry. Please, Mrs. Bennett, can you come?" The urgency, the hint of deep, shared grief convinced me. I vaguely remembered a man standing at the back of the funeral home, gray-haired, in a dark suit, disappearing before the receiving line. "Where are you?" I scribbled the address, an industrial area on the east side of town, on the back of a grocery receipt. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I dressed quickly, jeans and a sweater, found my keys, and drove across town with a tight, focused grip on the steering wheel. The empty spot in the garage was still fresh in my mind, but now a fragile thread of hope, a bizarre, improbable hope, pulled me forward. What could Alistair possibly have wanted me to know? The industrial area was a landscape of concrete and metal, a sharp contrast to the familiar tree-lined streets of my neighborhood. I found Vance Classic Autos at the end of a long, unassuming street. The building was modern, clean, and behind a chain-link fence, a row of vintage cars gleamed under the early sun. A man, maybe 65, with kind, tired eyes and gray hair, stood by the main entrance, watching for me. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, a contrast to the funeral attire I vaguely remembered. As I parked, he walked towards me. "Mrs. Bennet, thank you for coming." His eyes were indeed red-rimmed. "You're Theo?" I asked. Shaking his hand, his grip was firm but a tremor ran through it. "Theo Vance, your husband. Your husband saved my life 25 years ago." He spoke with deep reverence. I simply waited, sensing a profound story waiting to be told. Theo looked at the ground, took a ragged breath, and continued his confession. "I needed a business loan. Had a dream of opening this place. Every bank turned me down, bad credit, no collateral, just a dream and a lot of nerve." He looked up, a raw honesty in his gaze. "Alistair co-signed for me, risked his own credit, his own savings, for a man he barely knew, a virtual stranger. He never told you, did he?" I shook my head, already knowing the answer. He wouldn't have. That's who Alistair was. Theo wiped his eye with the back of his hand, a quick, rough gesture. "This dealership exists because of him. I paid back every penny, and then some. But the debt goes deeper than money. I built a good life, a successful one, all because your husband believed in me when no one else would." The magnitude of Alistair's quiet generosity, his secret life of kindness, settled over me. He never sought recognition. He just saw a man with a dream and quietly helped him build it. Theo's voice tightened, moving from reverence to a controlled anger. "When your son brought the wildfire in Wednesday, I knew it the second I saw it. Alistair talked about that car every time we ran into each other. Car shows, auctions. He'd show me the pictures, tell me about the progress." He paused, his face sickened. "Caspian said he sold it. He did. To me. Your son had no idea what he was selling. I asked him if he knew the value. He said 15,000 sounded fair." My stomach plummeted, a cold, heavy stone. I had accepted Caspian's paltry sum as an insult, but now the truth was about to become something far worse. "What's it really worth, Theo?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, bracing myself for the number. Theo met my eyes, his own full of pity and outrage. "Mrs. Bennet, it's a documented 1967 Shelby GT 500, one of 2,048 ever made. Alistair restored it to museum quality. It's worth around $180,000. The number was a shockwave. $180,000. My son had sold his father's legacy, the symbol of 20 years of love and work, for a fraction of its true value, for a mere $15,000, a sum only enough to buy a 2-week trip to Paris. I sank onto the curb, the concrete hard and unyielding, the world spinning in the wake of the figure. Theo sat down beside me, a silent, empathetic presence. "I bought it from him," he said finally, his voice low. "Paid him the 15,000 because he was desperate. Said something about a Paris trip with his wife. But Mrs. Bennet," he leaned in, his gaze intense, "that car was never mine to keep. It was just a holding place. Alistair made me promise 2 years ago." He stood, offered me his hand, and helped me up. "Come inside. There's something you need to see." He led me through the clean, brightly lit shop to the expansive garage. 3 cars sat under covers, but he stopped at the last one and pulled the sheet back. The wildfire sat there, a masterpiece in burgundy, its chrome shining, its presence filling the void that had consumed my own garage. I walked toward it slowly, placed my hand on the cool, smooth hood, I felt Alistair in every curve, every perfectly aligned panel. I opened the driver's door and slid into the leather seat. It smelled like home. Theo leaned against the door frame. 2 years ago, Alistair asked me to help him install something, a hidden compartment. I looked up, the adrenaline rushing back. He said if anything ever happened to him, I needed to make sure you knew about it. Made me swear. Theo gestured to the dashboard behind the radio. I didn't look inside. He said this was for Rachiel, and only Rachiel. My heart hammered against the wall of my chest. Alistair hadn't just been restoring a car. He'd been building a lifeboat, and he'd chosen Theo to be its captain. My husband was still protecting me. My hands were shaking as Theo showed me how to release the panel. He pressed one spot, pulled another, and the radio face swung away, revealing a dark, hidden cavity. Theo immediately stepped back, leaving me utterly alone with the secret my husband had kept for 2 years. I reached into the compartment, and my fingers brushed against paper, a thick manila folder, heavy and full. Underneath it was a sealed envelope with my name, Rachiel, written in Alistair's familiar script, and a small, heavy wooden box containing a single key. The silence of the garage was suddenly charged, electric. This wasn't about a car or money anymore. This was about the final whispered truth from a man who had loved me enough to prepare for his own death. I opened the sealed envelope first. The letter inside was dated 2 months before Alistair died. His handwriting looked tired, the letters a little looser than usual. Carol, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't tell you while I was alive. You would have wanted to handle it together, and I know that, but I needed to protect you from this until I had proof. I've been investigating Sylvia for 18 months. She's not who she says she is. Her real name is Sylvia Courtland. She's done this before, twice that I've found so far. I reread the name, feeling a wave of icy horror. He knew. He spent the end of his life quietly digging, not trusting his own son's judgment, but trusting his love for me and his instinct to protect our family. The letter continued, each line a sharp blow of realization. In this folder is everything I've gathered. Photos, documents, contact information for her previous victims. Their stories are the same. She targets men with aging parents and family assets. She's going to target our house, Rachiel. That's her pattern. She'll convince Caspian that you're declining, that you need care, that the house should be sold. Then she'll disappear with the money. I thought back to Sylvia's overly sweet suggestions about downsizing and the concern in her voice about my safety. It wasn't concern, it was strategy. Alistair hadn't just suspected her, he had mapped out her playbook. I confronted her once, carefully, watching her reaction. She's very good at what she does. Caspian doesn't see it. He won't believe me without ironclad proof, and I don't have it yet. The key in this box is for our safe deposit box at First National, Box 447, inside our stock certificates I bought in 1994, as a favor to a patient. Check the current value. You're taken care of financially. Theo knows to call you if anything happens to this car. He's a good man. Trust him. Protect yourself. Protect our son. He's a victim in this too. I love you. I'm still protecting you, Alistair. I read the last words twice, the tears finally coming not from grief, but from overwhelming gratitude and the sudden crushing weight of what he had carried alone. He spent his final months being misunderstood by his own son, all to save us both. I opened the manila folder. Inside were photos. Sylvia at a wedding with an older gray-haired man. Another photo, another man. Then, the marriage certificates. Sylvia Courtland married Stanley Wright. Phoenix, Arizona, June 2019. Sylvia Courtland married George Murphy, Tampa, Florida, March 2021. Newspaper clippings detailing elderly fraud and stolen life savings were tucked beside pages of Alistair's careful notes about Sylvia's behavior, her questions about the house, my health, our assets, dates, and times. At the back, phone numbers for Stanley Wright and George Murphy, and a final urgent note from Alistair. Need more concrete proof before telling Caspian. He won't believe me without it. She's too skilled. If you're reading this and I'm gone, please finish what I started. Protect our son." 8 months I'd spent grieving a man I thought I knew completely. He'd carried this terrifying secret, this dark investigation, all to keep me safe. I closed the folder, held it tight against my chest, and the sobs returned, deeper and harder than before. He was protecting me even from the grave. Theo returned, standing quietly in the doorway. I wiped my face, got out of the car, and looked at him, resolute. He was protecting me, even after he died. Theo simply nodded. That's who Alistair was. I held up the list of names. "I need to call these men. I need to know what happened to them." Theo gestured to his office. "Take all the time you need. She's not going to get away with this, Mrs. Bennett." "No," I confirmed, looking at the car, at the evidence, and at the path my husband had paved for me. "She's not." I sat in Theo's quiet office, the thick folder of Alistair's investigation spread out on the desk, feeling like a detective thrust into her first case. I dialed the first number, my hand shaking slightly, and put the phone on speaker so Theo could witness the call. Stanley Wright answered on the third ring. His voice was weary, flat, like a man who had been expecting this call for years. "Hello, Mr. Wright. My name is Rachel Bennett. I'm calling because my son is married to a woman named Sylvia Cortland." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end, followed by a profound sigh. "I wondered when this call would come," he finally said. I gripped the edge of the desk. "Can you tell me what happened?" Stanley was 58, and his story unfolded slowly, each word carefully chosen, a practiced narrative of heartbreak. He met Sylvia at a community center where his mother volunteered. She was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in him. A lonely man whose wife had died 3 years earlier. They married 6 months later. His mother, he admitted with regret, had concerns, saying something felt off, but he'd dismissed it as overprotectiveness. After the wedding, Sylvia began subtly planting seeds of doubt. "Your mother seems to be slowing down. She forgot my name yesterday. Is that normal?" She found articles about dementia and elderly falls, leaving them where Stanley would see them. Over months, she built a case that his mother wasn't safe in her own home. The escalation was chillingly methodical. Sylvia found a luxurious memory care facility, $20,000 a month. The only way to afford it was to sell his mother's house, the home she'd lived in for 42 years, for $280,000. Stanley, convinced by Sylvia's constant manufactured anxiety, persuaded his mother it was for her safety. The money went into a joint account with Sylvia. 2 weeks after his mother was moved to the facility, Sylvia disappeared, cleaned out the account, every penny, leaving no forwarding address and changing her phone number. His mother died 6 months later. Stanley's voice cracked, the grief fresh and raw. She kept asking when she could go home. I kept telling her soon, but there was no home anymore and no money to get her one. My mother was fine, Mrs. Bennett. She didn't need that place. She needed her home. He offered a final desperate warning. "Whatever Sylvia is telling your son about you, don't believe it. Document everything. She'll start small. Little comments about you forgetting things, being tired. Then she'll escalate." I thanked him, hung up, and sat staring at the phone, the cold reality of Sylvia's calculated malice sinking in. Theo silently brought me a glass of water, which I drank before dialing the second number. George Murphy answered immediately. "George Murphy." I introduced myself, and he sighed, a sound of heavy resignation. "Sylvia Cortland." "Yeah, I've been waiting for someone to call." George was 61. His story was different, but the pattern was identical. He met Sylvia at his father's funeral in early 2021. She played the role of the sympathetic stranger, the one who understood grief. They married 8 months later. George had inherited his father's small auto repair shop, 40 years of work, but he didn't want to run it. Sylvia suggested selling it. "It's too much stress. Sell it. We'll take the money, travel, heal together, start fresh." He sold the shop for $195,000. The money went into their joint account. 3 days after the check cleared, Sylvia was gone, vanished. George confirmed Stanley's warning. She targets men with aging parents and family assets. She researches them first, knows everything before she even introduces herself. He asked if Caspian had access to my finances or my house. Not yet, but she's been setting the stage, I told him. Then you have time. Stop her before she gets him to sign anything. After I hung up, Theo pulled out a business card. Alistair suspected all of this. He had a buddy, a private investigator, Thamos Coleman. They were working together. Why didn't Alistair tell me any of this when he was alive? I asked Theo, the question a mix of pain and confusion. Theo shook his head. He said he needed ironclad proof, said Caspian was so in love, he'd never believe it otherwise. He didn't want to cause pain with unproven suspicions. Theo handed me the business card. Thamos has been waiting. Call him. But I knew there was a stop to make before contacting the private investigator. I had to follow the other instruction in Alistair's letter. I drove across town to the First National Bank, the small wooden box with the key resting heavy in my purse. The bank was a flurry of Friday afternoon activity, normal life happening all around me. I asked for access to the safe deposit boxes. The manager, a woman my own age, led me to the vault. Box 447. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a single envelope. I opened it to find stock certificates in a protective sleeve and another letter from Alistair. Alara, I bought this stock as a favor to a patient in '94. His son was starting a tech company and needed investors. I gave him $5,000, never expecting anything. I held my breath, the paper feeling flimsy, yet immensely important. I honestly forgot about these certificates. Found them last month while organizing files, looked up the company and nearly fell over. This is worth more than we ever saved. This is for you, for our future, for security. If you're reading this from the safe deposit box, something happened to me. Sell these when you're ready. Live well, travel, stay independent. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. You're taken care of, Dan. My heart thumped, a nervous, hopeful drumbeat. I took the certificates to the bank manager. Can you tell me what these are worth? She researched them on her computer, and her eyes widened slowly. Mrs. Bennett, she whispered. TechCore Solutions went public last year. These shares are currently valued at approximately $342,000. The number hit me harder than the revelation about the car's value. $342,000. My husband hadn't just left me protection. He had left me independence. Financial security I never knew existed. I had resources now, power, options. I could fight Sylvia on equal footing. I had the emotional ammunition from the car and the financial shield from the safe deposit box. Alistair had thought of everything. I sat there, the manager's worried face swimming into focus, and felt a profound shift. I was no longer a victim. I was a beneficiary of a final, powerful act of love. That Saturday morning, I met Thamos Coleman, the private investigator, at a quiet coffee shop near the hospital. Thamos was 55, graying, and had the methodical, observant look of a former detective. He was already waiting for me, 2 folders on the table. Alistair was my friend, he said, his voice direct. When I heard about his death, I wondered if Sylvia would make her move. He explained that Alistair had made him promise not to contact me unless Sylvia acted against me. He didn't want to create panic with unproven suspicions. Thamos opened his folder, laying out printouts of Sylvia's digital footprint, posts on caregiver forums under a fake name, asking how to convince resistant elderly people they needed help, questions about memory care facilities, property browsing history that included Costa Rican real estate. Thamos laid out the most damning evidence, Caspian's credit card statements, 3 cards, totaling $32,000 in debt, all in Caspian's name, with charges for designer clothes, expensive restaurants, and a luxury hotel in Paris. Brian's salary as an office manager is $65,000 a year, Thamos stated plainly. Not enough to support this lifestyle. She's living on borrowed money he doesn't even know he owes yet. The shock was numbing. My son wasn't just paying for a vacation. He was being bankrupted to sustain Sylvia's illusion of wealth. Thamos then presented a projected timeline based on the documented cases of Stanley and George. Phase 1, the Paris trip. Build the dream. Make Caspian feel inadequate, indebted. Phase 2, the next 2 or 3 months, she'll start expressing concerns about you. Suggest you're declining. Phase 3, 4 to 6 months, she'll build the case for assisted living. Phase 4, 6 to 8 months, she'll convince him to sell your house. I nodded, my home suddenly feeling vulnerable, targeted. My house is paid off, worth $320,000. Thamos confirmed, exactly. Her total take from your family would be over $350,000, plus the car money. She's in the setup phase now. When they get back from Paris, the campaign starts in earnest. Can the police stop her now? I asked, frustrated by the legal limbo. Not yet, Thamos admitted. She hasn't committed a crime in this state. The previous scams were in Arizona and Florida. Until she actually takes money or commits fraud here, the police can't act. The horrifying truth was that we had to wait for her to make her move. So, we build the case now, Thamos instructed. Document everything. When she makes her move, we're ready. He leaned forward, his eyes serious. And Caspian has to see the truth himself. If you just tell him, she'll convince him you're paranoid. He has to discover it. I understood the painful calculus. His love for her was an armor. Only the weight of her own deception could break it. That evening I sat at my kitchen table, my old nurse's notebook open, and made a list of every red flag I'd dismissed over the last 2 years. 2 months ago, Caspian asking where I kept the house deed. 6 weeks ago, Sylvia taking photos of every room during a visit. 3 weeks ago, Sylvia commenting on how tired I seemed. 2 weeks ago, a brochure for Sunset Hills Senior Living falling from Sylvia's purse. The pattern was undeniable, a meticulous preparation to brand me as incompetent and get my house on the market. Sylvia wasn't a wife, she was an embedded threat. I thought about the stock certificates, the $342,000, and the investigation file hidden inside the wildfire. Alistair put the money in the bank, the safest place for money. He hid the evidence in the car, his private sacred space, the one place Sylvia never went, showing no interest in his work or his passion. He thought of absolutely everything. Alistair protected me in every way possible. He left me money, he left me evidence, and he left me people who would help. I closed my notebook, my resolve hardening. The campaign was about to begin, and I would be ready. Now, I had to protect my son from the predator he was sleeping beside. They returned from Paris on a Tuesday, both slightly tanned, but Caspian looked more stressed than rested, deep lines around his eyes that weren't there before. I played the part perfectly, the doting, slightly aging mother. I invited them for dinner and made Alistair's favorite pot roast, Caspian's childhood comfort food, too. They arrived at 6. Sylvia was dressed in clothes I'd never seen, a sleek silk blouse and designer jeans, the scent of expensive perfume filling the kitchen. I hugged Caspian at the door. He held on for a second longer than usual, a subconscious need for safety. Sylvia's hug was quick, merely a social formality. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd raised Caspian, the same chairs Alistair had refinished decades ago. Sylvia immediately seized control of the conversation, painting a vivid picture of their Parisian opulence. She described the stunning hotel, the private museum tours, the effortless glamour of the life they'd briefly touched. It was wonderful, she said, her voice dripping with artificial regret. But it made me realize how much we're missing out on. Caspian works so hard, and we have so little to show for it. She looked pointedly at me, the meaning clear. Your money is the solution. I kept my face neutral, passing the potatoes as if the comment meant nothing. Caspian chimed in, echoing her theme. Mom, you should think about traveling too, seeing things. I gave a vague, non-committal answer. Then Sylvia leaned forward, smiling her reasonable, chilling smile. Raquel, this house is really too big for one person. Have you thought about downsizing? Maybe something more manageable? There it was. Phase 2, exactly on Thamos's timeline. The first direct move. I'm managing fine, thank you, I replied firmly. This is my home, of course. Her smile didn't waver. We just care about your safety, the stairs, the yard work. It's a lot for someone your age. Caspian nodded along, using her carefully constructed language. We worry about you here alone, Mom. I noticed his phrasing. We, not I. Sylvia's words were coming out of his mouth. I let her drop the subject, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. The seeds were planted, and she'd push harder next time. After dinner, while we were having coffee and apple pie, Sylvia excused herself. Bathroom down the hall. 10 minutes later, I excused myself and deliberately went upstairs, finding her near Alistair's old office, the downstairs bathroom door clearly open and empty behind her. She jumped when she saw me, a flicker of genuine surprise on her perfect face. Oh, I got turned around. This house has so many rooms. I didn't let her lie settle. The bathroom is downstairs where it's always been. She laughed, a forced, tinkling sound, and touched my arm. Of course, silly me, too much wine with dinner. I led her back downstairs, silent, my eyes telling her I saw through the performance. They left an hour later, Sylvia all smiles, Caspian giving me a final quick hug. Love you, Mom. As soon as the BMW pulled away, I went straight to my notebook and wrote down every detail. Bathroom lie, upstairs reconnaissance, downsizing suggestion. The whole exchange had felt like a rehearsal, and the performance was about to begin. The next morning, Wednesday, I called Caspian. I need to talk to you about something. Can you come by? Just you. It's about your father. The lie was a necessary sin. His reaction was predictable. Sylvia and I don't keep secrets, Mom. My voice was firm. This is between you and me. Please, Caspian. He eventually agreed, but I knew he would tell Sylvia where he was going. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for my son to walk into the truth. Caspian arrived at 3, alone, but radiating tension. I had coffee ready and Alistair's investigation file laid out on the kitchen table. He saw the folder, and his shoulders went tight. Mom, if this is about the car again, I'm leaving. Sit down, please. He sat, arms crossed, defensive. I took a deep breath, speaking in my calmest, most factual ICU voice. Before I show you anything, I need you to listen. Really listen. Can you do that? This feels like an ambush, he muttered. It's protection, I corrected. I put Alistair's letter into his hands first. He read it, and the color drained from his face as he realized his father had been investigating his wife for 18 months before he died. His reaction was immediate, explosive denial. Dad never liked her. He was paranoid about everything. This is ridiculous. I stayed calm, pushing the folder forward. Look at the evidence, Caspian. I spread the photographs on the table. Sylvia at 2 different weddings with 2 different men, followed by the marriage certificates. Stanley Wright, Phoenix. George Murphy, Tampa. Caspian stared at them. This could be anyone, someone with the same name. I handed him the paper with the phone numbers, written in Alistair's neat hand. Call them. Ask them about their wives. You want me to call random strangers? He demanded, standing up and pacing the small kitchen. They're not random. They were married to your wife before you. He grabbed the paper, crumpling it in his fist. This is insane. Sylvia wouldn't. She loves me. Then prove me wrong, I challenged, holding his gaze. Call them. Prove your father wrong. He slammed the paper onto the table and headed for the door. Why are you doing this? Can't you just let me be happy? My voice broke, but my will held firm, because your father died trying to protect you, and I am not going to let his last months be for nothing. The door slammed behind him, rattling the house. I watched him speed away, not knowing if he would call the numbers or run straight to Sylvia. The bomb was dropped. The choice was his. The waiting was agonizing. I couldn't eat or focus. Thamos called at 8 to check in. He was angry, I told him. I don't know what he'll do. Give him time, Thamos advised. The truth has to sink in. But time felt like a luxury we didn't have. At midnight, the phone finally rang. Caspian's name on the screen. Caspian. His voice was wrecked, raw with unshed tears. I called them. Mom, I called them both. He was sobbing. What did they say? Everything. Stanley's mother, George's father's shop. It's the same, exactly the same story. My heart ached for the monumental pain he was enduring. I went home after I left your house, he choked out. I was so angry, but I kept thinking about Dad, about those marriage certificates, so I decided to test her. He pushed her gently about her past, her family, the things he thought he knew. Her answers were different, completely different from things she told me before. Then, he confronted her with the credit card debt Thamos had uncovered. Her whole face changed, Mom, like a mask came off. She said they were business investments. I wouldn't understand. I kept pushing, asked to see the statements. She packed a bag right then, no more pretending. Said I was weak. Said I was just like what Dad said, just like all of them. His voice collapsed. She walked out, just got in her car and left. I've been calling her phone. She won't answer. Stay there, I told Caspian, my voice regaining its old ICU clarity. I'm calling Thamos Coleman. I hung up and dialed Thamos immediately. He answered on the first ring. I'm already tracking her through the credit cards, he reported. She checked into the airport Marriott an hour ago. She's leaving. Made multiple cash withdrawals over the last 2 hours. Got about 12,000 total, and she just booked a flight. He paused, and my stomach clenched. Mexico City, 6 a.m. departure. One way. She's running, I stated, the realization solidifying my resolve. Yes, but I found something else. Thamos's voice was tight with focus. Sylvia Cortland is a stolen identity. The real Sylvia Cortland died in a car accident in 2018. This woman's real name is Linda Marsh. She's wanted for fraud in 2 other states under different names. Finally, the crucial proof. Can the police stop her? I asked. I've been in contact with detectives in Arizona and Florida. They'll issue a warrant. If we move now, we can get her at the airport before she boards. What do you need? I asked. Caspian's cooperation, his statement about the credit card fraud. Can he do that? Yes, I said without hesitation. I'll make sure of it. At 3 a.m, Thamos, Caspian, and I met at my house. Caspian looked utterly destroyed, his eyes red and vacant, the shock of betrayal, a visible weight on his young face. Thamos quickly laid out the plan. Sylvia was leaving on a 6 a.m. flight. Police were ready to arrest her, but they needed Caspian's statement about the forged credit cards. This means it gets public, Thamos warned him. You'll have to testify. Are you ready for that? Caspian looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. What would Dad do? The question hit me with surprising force. Your father spent his last months building a case against her. He died before he could finish it. He'd want you to stop her, not for revenge, but so she doesn't do this to someone else. Caspian was quiet for a long moment, the weight of his father's last sacrifice resting on his shoulders. Then, a slow, determined nod. Call the police. Let's go to the airport. We drove through the empty, pre-dawn streets in Thomas's car. Caspian sat in the back, staring out the window, processing the rubble of his marriage. I reached back and took his hand. He held on tight, a man clinging to his last tether. The airport was just beginning to stir when we arrived. Harsh fluorescent lights, tired business travelers. We stood behind a large column near the security checkpoint. Thamos positioned us where we could see, but stay back. The police were already there, 2 detectives in plain clothes waiting. We didn't speak. We just waited for the predator to walk into the light. It was 5:30 a.m. when she appeared. Sylvia, pulling 2 large suitcases, wearing a designer coat and sunglasses despite the hour. She looked completely self-assured, calm, and utterly confident, a predator about to vanish into the wilderness. She moved smoothly into the security line. The plainclothes detectives moved. Ma'am, we need to speak with you. Sylvia turned, and for a split second her perfect composure fractured. Then she smiled, a professional icy mask snapping back into place. "Is there a problem, officers?" The detective showed his badge. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Linda Marsh." Sylvia's smile froze. "I don't know who that is. My name is Sylvia Bennett." "Ma'am, please step aside." She looked around, calculating her escape route, saw the other detective blocking the exit, and then she ran. She dropped her luggage, kicked off her expensive heels, and ran in stockings across the polished terminal floor. Airport security caught her before she made it 20 feet, tackling her near the departure board. She fought, kicking and screaming, a sudden horrifying unraveling of her polished facade. "Get off me. I haven't done anything." People stopped, watched, phones raised. The police handcuffed her right there on the floor, reading her rights as she thrashed. A detective opened her abandoned luggage. The second suitcase held stacks of cash, rubber banded together, $48,000, he'd later tell us, and a passport with her photo, but the name Linda Brennan. They lifted her to her feet, and she was still struggling when she saw us, Caspian and me, standing 30 feet away. She went completely still. Then her face contorted into pure, unrestrained rage. "You!" she screamed, lunging toward him until the police held her back. "You did this. You're pathetic, weak, stupid, just like the others. You really thought someone like me would want you? You're nothing, nothing!" Caspian flinched, the words striking him with brutal force. I stepped forward only slightly, just enough to put myself between my son and her venom. She immediately turned her fury on me. "And you, interfering old woman. This was mine, my score. 3 years I spent on this. You should have minded your own business and died already." Her voice echoed through the vast terminal. I did not react. I simply stood there, kept my hand on Caspian's arm, grounding him. The police dragged Sylvia away, her screaming threats fading as they took her through the security doors. Then she was gone. Caspian stood frozen, shaking, the last illusions of his love shattered by the raw hatred of the woman he'd chosen. "Let's go home," I said gently. 2 weeks later, the chaos had settled into methodical police work. Detective Ramirez explained the findings. Sylvia's real name was Linda Marsh, a professional con artist wanted for elder fraud in multiple states. Sylvia Cortland was a stolen identity. The prosecutor expected a plea deal, 12 to 15 years in federal prison. Stanley Wright and George Murphy's cases were reopened, giving them a chance to recover some of their stolen funds. Caspian's credit card debt was mostly forgiven. The fraud claims were approved. 1 month after the airport, Caspian showed up at my door with 2 suitcases. "Can I stay here just for a while?" "Of course." He moved back into his old high school room. The marriage was annulled, legally invalid due to the stolen identity. Caspian started therapy twice a week. Some days he was functional, making breakfast and helping around the house. Other days he was withdrawn, staying in his room. I didn't push, just kept the space safe and quiet. Years as a nurse taught me that healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, and it takes time. 2 months after the arrest, I found him in the garage. He was sitting on Alistair's old workstool, holding the work journal, tears streaming down his face. I stood in the doorway, waiting. I found this on the workbench. His voice was thick. He read aloud an entry from years ago, taught Caspian to change the oil today. He's 12, old enough to learn. His hands are still small, but careful. He listened to every word, so proud of him. Caspian's hands shook. "I barely remember this, Mom. Working on the car with him. I sold his car. I threw it away for a trip to impress a woman who was planning to destroy our family." "You didn't know," I insisted. "I should have known. Dad tried to warn me." I pulled out the letter Alistair had hidden, the one explaining he didn't want to tell Caspian without ironclad proof because he knew Caspian would be heartbroken. "He didn't blame you, son." Caspian finally broke down completely. I held him, rocking my 38-year-old boy in the space that smelled of his father. We sat in the quiet garage, surrounded by Alistair's tools. Eventually, his tears stopped. I wish the car was still here. I'd learn everything about it the way Dad wanted me to. I squeezed his shoulder, saying nothing. 2 months later, I heard an engine rumble outside. Deep, powerful, familiar. I looked out the kitchen window and my chest seized. The wildfire sat in my driveway, burgundy paint gleaming. Theo Vance was behind the wheel. Caspian was instantly beside me. We walked out onto the porch. Theo got out, smiling, bringing her home where she belongs. He walked up and handed the keys to me. This was never mine, Mrs. Bennet. Alistair built it for you. He'd want you to have it, want Caspian to learn it. Caspian was speechless, staring at the car he had sold for $15,000, now returned by his father's friend. We opened the garage door. Theo backed the Shelby into its spot, the same spot it had left months ago. The engine shut off, and the silence was instantly full again. Motor oil, old leather, Alistair. Theo hugged us both before he left. He'd be proud of what you did, Rachel, and he'd be proud you came back. Caspian. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning, we were in the garage, Caspian with the work journal, me with coffee. We opened the hood. I don't know where to start, he said. Lard, he said. I opened the journal to the page marked Teaching Caspian. Start with the oil, I read. Check it first, every time. Before you drive her, know she's ready. We worked all morning, following Alistair's careful notes. I watched my son's hands, careful and focused, tracing the work of his father. His face was relaxed, truly smiling. I forgot how much I loved this, he said. We'll take care of it, I corrected. 4 months after the return, I stood in the garage with the keys in my hand. Caspian came out. You ready? I think so. I got behind the wheel, Caspian in the passenger seat. I started the engine. The Shelby roared to life. I backed out and drove down Oakwood Drive, the sound of the engine a powerful purring rhythm. Caspian laughed, a genuine joyful sound. Dad would lose his mind right now, in the best way. We drove with no destination, just driving. We drove past the hospital where I'd worked, past the places Alistair and I built our life. We were independent, protected, and healing. I pulled back into the driveway and parked the car perfectly. Caspian turned to me. Dad would be so proud of us. He was. Alistair was still protecting us, the investigation he built, the stocks he left, and the friendship he cultivated, all coming together in the final beautiful return of the wildfire. So that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Would you have been able to forgive your child for selling something that precious? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine.